Hello again, everybody. This video is sponsored by a contribution from Word Girl, and here's her story. Hi, Ollie. I just made a donation to your PayPal account. I wish it could be more. Just so you know, I have included some emails in which mention relevant details which could easily identify the person I will be writing about. I understand if you need to change or eliminate some of the details. However, I do very much want you to read the emails out loud, as I am sure you will have some comments about them. I love your sense of humor and taste in music. I'm a huge Nirvana fan. Since this email is in my real name, I request that when making the video of my story, you refer to me as Word Girl, after the cartoon. I have been wanting to write and share my experience with you and many others who watch your channel, but have hesitated in doing so, perhaps because doing so would make all of this what I experienced too real. Before I go into the details of what occurred, I just wanted say a big thank you to you and all you do for us who have suffered at the hand of narcissists. What you do is nothing short of a humanitarian effort, and is really important to me that you know the service you provide is very much valued and appreciated, not just by me, but by everyone who watches you, so thank you. I realize what you are providing us is not just a place in which to vent, although it is certainly that, but more importantly, for me at least, is that by writing you and sharing my story and having you create a video from it, is that it gives me a much needed platform in which to feel heard. And wow, just being heard is a priceless gift after being in a relationship with a narcissist, precisely because I had to fight so much to be heard in the relationship at all. I also feel that by having a video made, something tangible and real, something that I can have for my own self, while at the same time sharing with you and everyone who watches the channel, will be very cathartic for me. I want to heal from this. I want to move forward with my life. I want to be okay. So where do I start? At the beginning, I guess. I met this person 4.5 years ago. We lived in different states, about 4 hours apart. He had recently divorced his second wife. He has also divorced his first wife, the mother of his 2 older children. The first wife he claimed to have divorced because she had an affair. The second wife he claimed to have divorced because she stole money from him. I'm not quite sure how it's possible to steal from your own spouse, since all their finances were combined. He tried to explain it several times to me. She was an accountant, and so he let her handle the family finances. She was also divorced and had children too at the time, 4 to be precise. So it was a blended family of sorts. His rationale for marrying both women, to me at least, was that the first ex was Chinese and he wanted to help her. He believes she married him for a green card. In spite of the fact that she is a rather esteemed avant-garde musical composer who has arrived in the States on a Rockefeller Foundation grant. The second ex he claimed he married to get these kids raised. In his less charitable moments, he has said he had the worst sex of his life with the second ex, but needed someone to help him. He really said this: keep the trains running on time. I always wondered about that particular line, keep the trains running on time. Was she a train conductor in addition to being an accountant? No. Keep the trains running on time is a slogan from Nazi Germany, is what they used to say about Hitler. Like, Hitler killed all these people, but at least he kept the trains running on time. That's a Nazi quote. That's exactly what that is. That's exactly what that is, and that should tell you what his thinking is. Doesn't matter if you fucking throw 6 million Jews in an oven. The subway's here. So when I met him, he had been divorced twice. We had some things in common, a love of literature and art. He was the director of an MFA program in creative writing. I taught as an online literature and humanities adjunct at various universities. Because of our respective jobs, which allowed us a great deal of flexibility and mobility, we were able to sustain our relationship with this 4-hour distance between us, visiting one another regularly. From everything I have read and researched about narcissists and narcissism, I realized that in the beginning I was being love bombed. The intensity and swiftness of our involvement was almost immediate. He wondered if he could wait for sex as I wasn't ready, and he informed me that he never had to wait so long for sex. It wasn't even quite 2 months before we finally did the deed. I remember after his first visit to my apartment having a talk with him at a local coffee shop wherein he said something about, if we hadn't had sex in 6 months, then I think we should just call it a day and be friends. And that's the thing I discovered was a reoccurring pattern for us and for our relationship. How things sound okay and even reasonable on the surface, but always underneath the surface lurked an immense elements of control, manipulation, and domination. Within, I would say, about 6 months, he began to talk to me about moving to where he was. I was hesitant because I had only recently divorced myself and really loved my apartment and where I lived. So we continued on with this relationship with daily phone calls, text messages, and emails, and as many visits to each other as we could fit in. I accompanied him to a conference in Chicago where there had been a large dinner he had arranged for friends and work colleagues. I asked him prior, since I was always been very shy, to please just stay by my side during the event. He promised he would, and it was my first of many promises he would break that he had made to me. I went to the restroom, and when I returned, the seat next to him had been taken by another man and was rapidly filling up with others. My so-called boyfriend, yes, within a month of meeting me, he declared that he would not be searching or dating anyone else, as he wanted us to be exclusive. I was in love, or so I thought, and happily agreed. I sat down at the table to discover my ex was engaged in a conversation with others. I sat at one end of the table, completely forlorn, and had older men sitting across from me, leering at my breasts and asking me why I was there. His total of ignoring of me was both embarrassing and angering. By the end of the dinner, I was infuriated and left on my own, walking back to the hotel we were staying in. He was calling and texting me, and I was ignoring him. Long story short, we made up, but that was only the first in many such behaviors and unhealthy patterns that were to make up the foundation of our relationship. The pattern was as follows. He does or says something hurtful or disrespectful. I react, respond, followed by make-up sex. Sometimes the sex was good, sometimes it wasn't. According to him, it was the best sex he ever had in his life. I met his kids. He placed great value on education. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, especially as we were both well-educated types ourselves. However, for him, his children needed to attend and graduate from fancy private schools, Vassar and Oberlin. Because of this, and because of the settlement he had to pay to settle his second divorce, he had very little discretionary money. However, when he had the opportunity for a 3-week artist residency in Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the Fine Arts Work Center, he asked me to come with him. He also slipped in the question of whether we could drive my car, as his has a lot of mileage on it. He said that he would pay for the gasoline and that we would split the costs of groceries. He also asked if I would write him a check to help him with the deposit for securing our room there. In hindsight, looking back at all this, which occurred in the first 6 months of our relationship, I realized there were many red flags that occurred that I should have been aware of with him. I seem to have a tendency to bleach any red flags supremely white. Of course, I wanted to go to Provincetown. I had never been there before, and it sounded wonderful in many ways. It was. I couldn't really afford it as the time I was living near poverty level with adjunct teaching, but was too afraid to tell him this, and he often said he felt taken advantage of financially by both his exes. I later discovered that when the second ex who sold her house to move where she was, they were in the same state but different cities, that it was the sale of her home that then allowed them to make a down payment on their new family home. Do you see a pattern emerging here? I should also mention that when my ex divorced his first wife, the mother of his children, he was granted custody. His first ex had told him explicitly she did not want to have children, that she was not the motherly type, and she told me that he thought, surely she'll change her mind once she becomes pregnant. He also told me that when she did become pregnant, he phoned up an old girlfriend, whom he'd later tell me I reminded him of. to tell her that he was going to be a father. This previous girlfriend had loved him and wanted to marry him, and have a family according to him. She asked him, "Why are you phoning me?" And he said, when relating this to me, I couldn't understand why she wasn't happy for me. He genuinely seemed perplexed by this. I'm not making any of this up. So off to Provincetown we went. He wrote a poem about our time there. We witnessed along with others, a double rainbow. He incorporated that into the poem. Oh yes, he's a published poet. He has a few books on Amazon, one of which I stupidly left a review for, then removed, as I realized he doesn't deserve my words of praise. The second ex also apparently was bamboozled into leaving a review for another of his books, as well as when I asked him, "Who is this person?" while reading one of his reviews one day. He actually seemed embarrassed to tell me it had been his second ex who had used her maiden name. He said he asked her to do this, and I believed that. He later made a sarcastic joke at her expense that she wouldn't even know how to do such a thing as write a book, and made a mocking comment about her reading Danielle Steele books, yet he chose to marry her anyway. What a guy. The poem he wrote in Provincetown was later read out loud by him at one of the MFA residencies I attended. He dedicated it to me, my love, he said. This reading was given in front of an audience of students in the program, guest speakers, and other faculty who taught the program. It seems such a romantic thing to do, and that's the thing. I am romantic, very much so. And after the reading, one of his female colleagues, who I liked, came up to him and said how much she liked the poem and that she was glad to see his work becoming more emotionally accessible. I took this as a compliment that it was due to our great romantic love that I somehow had been the woman who had at least succeeded where all other previous women had failed. Yes, I was that delusional. I met his children within the first 6 months and liked them. However, they seemed to be either sad, the daughter, or angry, the son. The son came out as gay to me almost immediately after meeting me. My ex-narc had gone to a writer's session as part of the 2-week residency, and his son and I sat and talked and shared a bottle of wine. The son was underage, but assured me it would be okay with his dad. How naive was I? Obviously very naive. The son had something to tell me, and I was pretty sure that it was what it was, and I tried my best to respond in the kindest possible, assuring him that his father did love him very much and would understand. The son confessed to me that he was afraid to tell his father, saying he's always talking about carrying on the family name. Later, the son did come out to his father, my narc ex, who had already been told years by the son's mother, his first ex, that their child was gay. The way this narcissist son came out to him was rather amusing, as he overheard us having sex and became upset. Not because we were having sex, but because he wanted to have the freedom to be open about whom he loved. I was very proud of my ex-narc at the time because he seemingly handled it all very well. If anything, he seemed to overcompensate with both his children, which I could never understand. He would always try to frame it as, well, you're not a parent. If you were a parent, you would understand. But to me, it seemed as though by giving his children whatever they wanted, that he was, in fact, creating a scenario wherein they would have to be dependent on him. I could be wrong about this in retrospect, but it does make sense with all that I've learned about narcissism and narcissists in general. An example of the difference in how he treated his children and me would be this. He would take his kids out for lunch or dinner with their friends. My ex-narc would pay the bill for everyone, and people would say, what a great guy, how generous he is, what a wonderful father. That's what I imagine he wanted people to think anyway. However, quite often when it was just the two of us out to dinner, he would either expect us to take turns paying or just outright say, I can't afford to take you to a movie and a dinner. Now here's the thing, I have no problem paying my fair share. In fact, it gives me pleasure to treat those that I love and care about. However, in this relationship, I often felt as though it was somehow expected that I do so. My ex would say things like, "You're a grown adult woman, take responsibility, take ownership." And so when I finally began earning more money and tried and always seemed to fail to live up to his expectations, truly, it just never seemed to be enough. No matter what I did, how much money I spent, I never really felt true appreciated by him. Right, because you're just the narcissist cash cow. As it seems like he's motivated by all the women and his children in his life. You are his cash cow. Out in front of the people, he's loving and romantic. He's generous in pain. But one-on-one, you figure out, like, he's telling you, no, 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 that's for everybody else's benefit. So everybody else thinks what a wonderful guy I am, how deep I am. Remember your role. You're just a cash cow. You're just the bank. At one point, he was so strapped financially that he asked me if I would want to move into the house that he currently resided in and pay $100 a month, even though he might have to take in other boarders. I refused to do this because somehow it just didn't seem right to me. Of course, he tried to make it all sound like a win-win type situation. Just think of the money you could save, he would say. But we continued to talk about me making a move to where he was. Even though the majority of his work was online, he still had to make appearances on campuses at his office. When the house he was living in, the second divorce finally, when the house he was living in from the second divorce finally sold, apparently the ex had been living there with him, but then moved out. This was before we met. Given what I know of him now, I can't imagine how unbearable that must have been for her. I was the only one who helped him move, apart from the two movers he had hired to a new city in the same state. It was just me, him, and the two movers. His children were nowhere to be found. I can't remember what they were doing at the time. While helping him to pack up, I saw the divorce paperwork from the second marriage, and I'll admit it wasn't right. It wasn't right of me, but I read the transcript of the proceedings. Apparently, the bit about Narcissist not letting go is very true, as he appealed the decision not once but twice. I believe, talk about a dog with a bone, right? Anyway, in reading the transcript, I was struck by something the now second wife said in the transcript, which was, "I was very emotionally bullied in this marriage, Your Honor. I remember reading it not just once or twice, but several times, just taking in those words and realizing, with a chill in my entire body, that that was what I had been experiencing too. But I was so in love with him, or so I thought. I just couldn't allow myself to believe this, much less allow myself to see it." And here's another thing. It was never just outright nasty remarks that he would often make to, I suppose, create a feeling of unworthiness in me, but also more subtle, such as the following things. Within the first 6 months, he made fun of my luggage, my keychain, the Powerpuff Girls. I always liked them. And he would supposedly, in a loving, teasing manner, mock me for how I asked for directions. I realize all these things, and even the many arguments we would have and then make up from, can be part and parcel of any relationship. That is how I chose to see all this for the longest time. I told myself and other friends that I shared some of this with, well, we're still getting to know each other. This is to be expected. It will get better. But it never really did. On our way to Provincetown, driving the car, suddenly from out of nowhere, he said, "Those sunglasses make you look old." I remember feeling so startled, as if someone had just thrown ice cold water on my face, and remember thinking, maybe I didn't hear him right. Did he really just say that? Prior to this, we had just been talking and laughing, listening to the radio. It just seems so incongruous, but when I said that wasn't really a very nice thing to say, he just laughed and said, "Oh, you know you don't look your age, but those sunglasses aren't flattering to you." While in Provincetown, he did buy me a pair of sunglasses, and when I put them on, he said, "Now you look really sexy." The problem was I am quite nearsighted, so I couldn't wear them for very long. The so-called unflattering sunglasses I wore were prescription. He would often tell me how beautiful I was, only to then say something like, when your hair was curly, you look younger, or when you would be all dressed up, I wish, which was rare, as apart from some of his work functions, we never really went anywhere that upscale where I could actually dress up the way I always wanted to. He would say, you look really pretty, but you look even better when you're dressing more casually. So again, it always seemed that he wanted to make sure that I would feel off balance and unsure of myself. I would think, am I only beautiful one way to him? It didn't make sense, but again, I put down to different perspectives, different ways of being. I was the acknowledged emotional one, and he was the stoic one. It felt exciting. Opposites attract, all that. I remember one time he asked me if I would take the Myers-Briggs personality test. He had already done so and thought that if I did this too, we would have a better understanding of one another. He is an NJFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judgment. I turned out to be an INFP, introversion, intuition, feeling, perception. When he first asked me to do this, I remember feeling like it was suddenly in the middle of a Woody Allen movie. I took the test and we talked about it, and it even seemed to make sense, the traits that were attributed to my type. All the time I thought this was his way of being sweet and was so typical for us. He would have these talks that would just so often felt circular, that would often go on for hours and hours, and sometimes would even feel better afterwards, as though, hey, we've made a real stride forward, we'll be in a better place together with each other. But as I slowly discovered, any changes were temporary, and before long he would be back to the same old, or rather we would be back to the same old, with me feeling myself to be very much in love with him, and yet never quite understanding what exactly was happening in the relationship. It felt very much like an emotional, dizzying roller coaster. One specific way I feel the gaslighting effect worked on me was this. He would say many, many times, so often in fact, that it felt like a mantra, that I don't want drama in my life, I don't want chaos, I don't want emotional upset. So again, you see on the surface, this all sounds very good, right? I mean, who does want drama and chaos? Well, I mean, if a person is relatively emotionally and mentally healthy anyway. So this would be verbalized so often that I would begin to internalize it onto myself. I would think, okay, well, he says he doesn't want things, so we're having these things as a couple. Then I guess it must be me. I must be the one creating the drama, the chaos, the emotional upset. It's not him, it's me, which I realize now, alas, was exactly what he wanted me to think, and then behave accordingly, taking the blame, feeling myself to be less than, feeling myself to be the messed up one in the relationship. The only flaw he would ever admit was being impatient with me sometimes. This impatience would often take the form of not so kindly worded statements to me, such as, "What are you, brain dead?" When he said something to him when I said something to him that he didn't like, usually about his second marriage, but I always felt that he never fully processed the emotions about this. I was also hoping that by asking him questions about it, that he would perhaps admit that he had shared some of the blame for the failure of the marriage. He never did. That never happened. His favorite response, though, was to just shake his head in exasperation at me, as though I were some alien creature from another planet, and say, "You are really something." One time, after we had made love twice in one day, I suggested we go for some frozen yogurt and said I would treat. I was always well trained by then to say this, lest he think that I'm not paying my own way. We walked over to the frozen yogurt place and got our goodies. And when we were at the cash register, I realized I had forgotten my Visa check card. Not out of spite, but out of forgetfulness. When I looked at him and told him this, I almost felt like a small child being reprimanded by her father when he glared at me. I used to tell him it was his glare of God look. His father had been an Episcopalian minister, by the way, so it kind of made sense. The cashier was standing there at the register looking at us after he glares at me and says, "What is this, the 1950s?" And reluctantly, with a heavy sigh, paid the cashier. I was mortified, not the least of which is because it couldn't have been more than $10. That couldn't have been more than $10. And also, I felt really hurt that we had made love earlier in the day too, and I remember thinking to myself, I feel like a prostitute for frozen yogurt. But then was also thinking, no, wait, I think a prostitute would be treated better actually. I didn't say anything to him, but I let it pass as I did so many other things. I realized he used triangulation a lot, whether he was comparing me to an old girlfriend who, until me, he always claimed he had the best sex of his life with. Until me, he would always tell me. In our first year together, we even visited his great love and her husband. She was unhappily married and shared with both of us a love affair she had. Her husband also had many affairs. It was fairly obvious they were not happy together and had not been for quite some time. And so by comparison, the happiness I felt with my now ex-narcissist at the time seemed beautiful. He later told me that when his second wife's divorce happened, he began to question whether he had ever had true love in his life and thus went online looking for both the girlfriend he always said I reminded him of and also the first great love for which he did find in Vermont and which we visited together. And I found myself thinking, how cool that he has such a lovely friendship with an ex, as I myself always prided myself on the ability to do this with exes. Of course, I am seeing all this very differently given my knowledge about narcissists and narcissistic supply now. I wonder if this old love of his even realizes what is happening, or if she does, if she even cares. I do remember something strange about that visit, though. I was taking a bath upstairs and the old flame had gone off the chiropractic, but her husband was still there. I was upstairs in his art studio. My narc ex kept coming up the stairs to the bathroom to check on me, he said. He did this twice, in fact, and I remember thinking it was sweet. Oh, he's jealous maybe. Who knows, really? Perhaps paranoid was more like it. But I guess the way that I framed so much of the friendship, desperately trying and almost always failing to find an excuse for the inexcusable, a way to explain it all away. He's been hurt. He feels betrayed by his previous wives, and he's just perhaps a bit cynical. How I wish someone would have literally slapped me upside the head and said, "Don't you see what is happening?" But no one did. People who cared about me would express concern when I would rather reluctantly begin to divulge certain details, hoping for some sort of explanation about his behavior. But I see now that I knew, but I didn't want to know what I knew, if that makes sense. I had so much invested in the relationship: time, energy, emotions, and money. It could not be real. It could not be real. It had to be real. He had to be everything that led me to believe that he was. Yes, yet one more thing he was always saying: "You have no idea how loyal I am to you," over and over again, much like much like brainwashing. Say it enough and she'll believe it, and I did. Yeah, I mean, I'm about to stay here. There's no way. If you don't realize it yet, and if you haven't figured it out yet, this guy this guy screws around. That's what he comes from. He goes around women who screw around. This is what he is. Another incident that happened with my ex-narc, was when he was driving my car in another area, and one of us familiar with and became outraged when I informed him he was going in the wrong direction. Now everyone knows that most guys don't like to stop and ask for directions, but this was after midnight and we had been out to a bar and had a few drinks. He became upset that he drove my car down one-way street and began yelling at me, shouting, "Get out of the car." When I reminded him that it was my car and that he should get out, he said, "Yeah, if I do, you really think you'll be able to find your way back?" And then laughed a bitter laugh and smirked at me. We finally made our way back and spent the rest of the evening and the next day ignoring each other, sleeping apart with him, then initiating sex the following afternoon. For a while, at least, we had made up yet again, but it was always short-lived. Since we agreed to be in an exclusive relationship, and he even showed me his test results for STDs, we never used condoms, he offered to, but thought we're in love, we trust each other. And also, I was taking birth control pills at the time too. After the breakup, I was horrified at the risk that I might have put my health in. I began to learn more about narcissists and narcissism and realize how often they may have in fact cheated on me, if not physically, then perhaps emotionally, and he always seemed to be on Facebook as much as he seemed to disdain it. So almost immediately I decided to end the relationship and went for STD checking, which was thankfully okay. Dodged that particular bullet at least. One of the more horrible incidents in our relationship occurred when we rented a cabin in a state park for a romantic getaway weekend. I know you have made videos, Ollie, about narcissists and the relationship with dogs, but I haven't yet watched them and need to do so. Anyway, this man had a dog that I just absolutely loved. In fact, I would often tell him I liked his dog better than I liked him, which was really almost true. So we were walking out on this trail with his dog and started arguing about something he just said. "That's it, I've had enough," and walked away from me. Yes, you read that right. He walked away from me, left me on the trail in the middle of this forest with absolutely no idea of which direction to go. I was so scared, and then I heard this noise from behind me, and lo and behold, it was his dog. I could hear her collar tags jangling, and I burst into tears of gratitude, throwing my arms around him and feeling so relieved I wasn't alone anymore. I later asked my narc if he had sent the dog back, but he always said no, that she just came on her own. I remember talking to her, saying, "Don't worry, we'll find our way out of here." And it was her presence that kept me relatively calm and safe, though every noise would startle me and I would worry. Eventually, we found our way out of the woods and came back to the main road in the park. When my ex walked away from me on the trail, he said, "I'll meet you at the car." And so his dog and myself walked all the way back to where I remembered he parked the car. It was several miles. When we finally arrived, he was standing there with a smirk on his face and said, "Did you enjoy your walk?" I was so livid I wanted to slap his smug face. Instead, I just said, "We're through." He said, "Okay," and we drove back to my apartment in total silence. When we arrived at my apartment, he asked me if I wanted him to stay. I didn't say anything, so he left. I made sure to take the pot he had asked me to obtain from him. Yes, he began smoking pot again after almost 30 years of not doing so. I thought we were breaking up and for a while it seemed that we were. But as was by now becoming a pattern with us, we made up again. He once said to me that he was smoking the pot. "When I smoke pot, I feel like I'm more on your wavelength," and laughed. Yeah, he actually said that. I also remember too that when he was smoking pot, he would often say things like, "I'm really so very in love with you, and I don't think you realize just how beautiful you are." These were lovely things to hear, and I told myself that was how he really truly felt, rather than with alcohol causing people to lose their inhibitions. I believe pot helped him speak from his heart, so I cherished those moments because I told myself he really did love me. He just couldn't say those things to me when he wasn't quite so high, therefore in control of his emotions. Amazing how easy it can be to justify behavior that shouldn't need to be justified in the first place. So now we come to the ending of the relationship. I think that the end was already happening before it happened, if that makes sense. This past year, back in September, I made a trip to the UK where I had some friends. It was a lifelong dream for me to do this since I had always been such an Anglophile. When my ex-narc also at the same time discovered that he had been awarded yet another residency from the Fine Arts Center in Provincetown shortly before I was scheduled to fly to the UK, he did his best to try to convince me to reschedule the flight and fly back out of Boston so I could go with him to Provincetown first. I told him I couldn't do this as my flight was already booked. Neither of us was happy about this, wanted to go with him, and I also wanted him to go with me to the UK, but he couldn't afford to do so. We kept in touch throughout that time, but it felt very strained. Terse sounding messages about him eating $5 all-you-can-eat oysters, me sending him pics of me at various places in London, etc. I remember feeling very alone and very angry for the most of that trip, but mostly just very sad. All throughout our relationship, we had been looking at houses to either live in and buy and or rent. Many of the houses we looked at were beautiful, and I could almost imagine myself living with him in this way, thinking how wonderful it would be, how I could redecorate the house itself. He could always be very complimentary about my style and decorating, such as the way I love and have fresh flowers around, etc. But something always stopped me, not the least of which was how he would say to me, I've owned several houses and I know how to do this, and why you just let me handle it? And why don't you just let me handle it? But then he would talk about finances and as though it were a business merger instead of a relationship, which always bothered me. He would make lists out of percentages about how much I should pay, how he should pay, because you see, I was always supposed to be understanding and never questioning of the fact that even though he made almost 3 times as much as me, that he had expenses. His children's elite college educations, his divorce settlement, his need to contribute to his retirement, which he had borrowed against in order to settle up the second divorce. My needs, my wants seemed to be very much an annoyance and an irritant to him, since he had shared with me that he had helped his second ex obtain her MBA degree, helping to finance it. I remember asking him once if I did move in with him, we could talk about perhaps him helping me finance going back to school to earn my doctorate degree. Again, he glared at me saying, why do you always want to talk about my money? I thought it was a fair question since I would be the one incurring the majority of the expense to make the move to where he was at the time. I remember being so very hurt and saddened when he said, well, you'll just have to figure that out for yourself on your own. Wow, talk about being partners, huh? You would think, if nothing else, that the best sex of his life might have some value and meaning for him, but apparently not. So my trip to the UK happened. This trip to Provincetown happened, and I remember while I was in the UK standing in the beautiful lobby of Fortnum and Mason's with a very dear friend of mine, and weeping, thinking my boyfriend should be here with me and he's not. It's not very melancholy. I was not very melancholy about this. I missed him and resented him by this point too. When October came around, I went to where he lived, and together, When October came around, I went to where he lived, and together we went to New York for the death of his family. His sister's husband passed away. I got to meet more of his relatives, and it was mostly a pleasant trip, except for the fact that once except for the fact that what was once had been very active, and even sometimes, though it had not always been an enjoyable sex life, had dwindled down to almost nothing. This, I later discovered, was part of the devalue phase. I remember texting him about the bread and breakfast we would be staying in and saying, "I miss making love to you." He texted back saying, "Today is a work day for me. I am very busy. Why do you have to be so emotionally intense all the time?" Wow, again, I felt so hurt, wondering, what have I done? And more importantly, where is the man who romanced and seduced me to be very much in love with me? Before I come back to my own home, we had a talk in which he reiterated the deadline he had given me for making the move to where he was. He kept saying how if this didn't happen by a certain time, which coincided with when his own lease on his apartment where he lived would be expiring, that perhaps we needed to go our own separate ways. He said he had already compromised on this several times. The occurrence of this couldn't have been worse because soon after he would be leaving in late October and staying through the end of November. Thus, no Thanksgiving together. For teaching a residency at a university in Taiwan. Bye-bye, baby. In addition to this, as one of his parting gifts before I came back to my apartment, he noticed two of my front tires were low on air pressure, so he wanted to put pressure in them for me before I drove back. While doing this, he had to remove the tire rims. It's the model of a car I have, a Hyundai. In attempting to put them back on correctly, he kicked at them with such force that it caused the two front tires, which I had recently purchased and had less than a year on, to completely go flat. What? You can't kick car tires and make them go flat. You can't kick car tires and make them go flat. He had to slash them. There isn't a human on earth who has enough physical strength to kick a car tire flat. I had to take my car to be repaired and have the two front tires put two new front tires put on as a result. Even the mechanic on the phone with my ex-narc, so that my ex could hear from that mechanic that whoever tried to put the hubcaps back on caused the two front tires to go flat. What? The bill came to over $300. Thankfully, I was in a position to afford it, but I'll never forget how a couple of days later, my ex casually threw down $100 in cash to help, in his words, defray the costs of having to purchase my two new tires. How does a hubcap go through a tire? I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. Putting a hubcap on is not going to rupture two tires. He became very upset when I refused asking me why I was being difficult. I kept saying, "I don't want your money." After many attempts to pressure me into taking money, he finally snatched it up and said, "Fine, be that way." Here's the thing, Ollie. If he had offered to cover the full amount, I would have accepted it, but offering $100 just felt like an insult. When I shared what happened with his work colleague, she was horrified on my behalf, and I remembered having the vague thought that perhaps what he really had wanted was to kick me instead of not the hubcaps themselves. I don't know how you could kick a hubcap through a tire, through a steel belted tire. You can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. That whole story just doesn't make any sense. He left for his trip and we emailed just about every day. While there, we had met up with two young Chinese girls, twins no less, that he had met at a previous artist residency. He spent the day with them, and in pictures he later sent to me. There were pictures of him. There were pictures of him with them at a restaurant, on the staircase, and at some opera house. His socks standing next to one of them in the guest house. I remember thinking, really, is he going to try to provoke a response out of me? It was almost laughable because I thought, I could have made a point of him sending me I could have made a point of him sending pictures of me with my friends while I was in the UK, but I purposely didn't do that. What would be the point? So instead of responding in an angry manner, which he was probably expecting, instead I wrote, "How wonderful that you were able to spend time with your friends while there." When he arrived back, he was talking about how the university in Taiwan wanted him to come there and how he wanted me to go with him next time. No mention was made of the fact that my work is very detail oriented, and so it's not quite as easy to just pack up my laptop and go. During the time he was in Taiwan, I began to have a small epiphanies about him and about our relationship. One of them being that he seemed intent on provoking certain responses and reactions from me, almost as if by doing so he could then say, "Well, see how unreasonable, childish, immature you are." And he did in fact say those things to me throughout the time we were together. By Christmas, he was really putting pressure on me to come be there with him and his kids for the holidays. I had always done this previously and had been exhausted and often ended up being sick due to the stress of it all. But this time I just didn't feel like it. This time I decided instead to remain in my apartment or take out the Chinese food and binge watch movies instead. And it actually ended up being a really relaxing holiday for me. By January, he had postal mailed me my Christmas gifts and I asked him if he wanted me for a few days. He reluctantly agreed, but said could only do so just for a few days. And I'm really sorry about the length of this video. I did not realize how long this was. By January, he had postal mailed me my Christmas gifts, and I asked him if he wanted me to visit for a few days. He reluctantly agreed, but said he could only do so just for a few days. He had an online class starting. The irony in how it was perfectly acceptable for me to pack up my laptop and travel to his home and work remotely under less stellar conditions never seemed to occur to him, as once again, it was all about him and what worked best for him. It's just so happened to be my birthday, and when we had the obligatory birthday dinner and movie, he also got stoned again. He really thought it was he was some kind of rebel and would often refer to himself as a conservative Christian anarchist. I'm not sure what he was supposed to mean or if he even knew himself. against my better judgment, and I ended up smoking with him and then had a panic attack on my birthday, no less. He ended up watching basketball on TV. We had sex and we talked about the upcoming move and how to best approach this some more. I still had misgivings about, but things seemed to be better between us. And when we left, we said, "I love you" to each other. Little did I know that that would be the last time I would see him or his dog, which I very much loved. In early February, we were trying to make plans to attend a conference in California for him. It was work related, and he attended these conferences. And he attends these conferences every year. For me, it would have been a mini getaway. We were both busy with work, and our schedules kept conflicting. When I explained to him that I had a particularly busy work day and did not like this at all. However, of course, in the past, when he would be working, if I would want to talk to him, he would then say, "Can you see I'm busy? Please be respectful." And when I asked him to do the same, he became annoyed. He said, "I don't want to put undue financial hardship on yourself with this trip," because once again, he was making it clear that he would pay for some things, but not everything, even though he had asked me months prior to accompany him. I felt an anger rise up inside me and texted him, So did you and your second ex-wife pay for her to attend these conferences with you?" That I was always a sore subject with him talking about the second wife, whom he described as really messed up. The first ex-wife was described variously as crazy, in need of severe psychiatric help, and a user. The second was described as vindictive and mean. Her family was derided as being all alcoholics and equally messed up. In fact, during the divorce, I believe he tried to shame his second wife by emailing her family to let them know what she had done, which according to him was to steal over $25,000. His first ex-wife, the mother of his two children, I actually liked. We formed a friendship of sorts, which he didn't like and would warn me to stay away from her. She's trouble. I found her to be eccentric and funny. We even exchanged Christmas gifts with one another, and she told me she thought it was good for him. Now my ex and former ex. We even spent Thanksgiving together twice during my relationship with the ex-narc. Well, I got to be honest with you here. If she started hanging out with my ex, I'd be pissed. And I understand this guy is a cheating, abusive, narcissistic asshole who's using you as an ATM. But I wouldn't hang out with his ex. I'd have been pissed at that. I would have definitely been pissed off at that. Anyway, about the California trip. He texted me back rather predictably, given how the narcissist thinks of their own self and thus had no problem making decisions for everyone involved. Again, always in context of how it would benefit them by saying, "This is not a good trip for us to take together. I want to go alone. Maybe we can plan a trip together later in the spring." I texted him back in a sarcastic manner saying, "Thank you for being an adult and mature enough to answer my question and for being so authoritarian too. I can't even begin to tell you the number of times this man would say to me, 'God, you're so sarcastic, you're so stubborn.' This particular gem you said once after sex, 'You're very good for my ego.' I think that Pixies song with the line, 'Where is my mind?' or rather for me, the entire time was in this relationship, where was my mind?" So a week goes by, very close to Valentine's Day, and I don't hear from him. This in itself for us wasn't unusual, as we would sometimes have a week or days of silence between us after an argument. And don't even get me started on the many times we would be driving in the car together and he would be lambasting me. Loudly hurtful for some transgression or or other. Anybody brings up my smoking, I'm going to ban you from the channel, by the way. I know it's bad, but it is what it is. Loudly and hurtfully for some transgression or another, there is nothing worse. I believe that being trapped in a long car ride with a narcissist who takes the opportunity to berate you, one particular remark from him, you think you're so cool, don't you? The anger on his face and in his voice is just terrifying to me. Valentine's Day Massacre. I get a phone call saying that I had flowers. Remember thinking, okay, somehow this is all going to be all right. He wants to mend fences. But no, the flowers were from a dear friend who he sends me flowers on special occasions. So I wanted the card attached to the flowers to be from my ex, but now when I saw they were from my friend, I cried, not because my friend had sent them, but because my so-called boyfriend hadn't. I remember feeling completely miserable that day. The silence was deafening. I remember when I placed those roses in a vase thinking, this is a sign from the universe. I need to heed this sign, meaning that my current relationship, the relationship that I had placed such great trust, hope, and belief in, was effectively over. All because I asked a question, and how I had been asking questions all along that my narcissist never asked, that my narcissist never liked, and in fact resented me for. After this, my anxiety was off the charts. I decided to phone him and left a voicemail. I was fairly sure that he wouldn't pick up, just saying that I hadn't heard from him, and I was wondering if everything was okay. I also asked him if we were breaking up, and could he please get in touch just to let me know if that was going on with us. Within a few hours, I checked my email. There was this email from him. Hi, I received your voicemail today. I feel like both of us deserve a greater degree of peace in our lives and a greater sense of well-being, a greater sense of happiness that we're finding in this relationship. He found someone else he likes better. That's what's going on. First line. That's what it is. These problems we have kept recurring. You are not happy being with me. I am not happy with the way that you seem to get upset so easily and often with me. I feel the need to give each other a great deal of space right now. At any rate, I need a great deal of space from my end. My interview is coming up this Friday. I want to be in a good frame of mind emotionally and spiritually. I have a second interview with another university on Monday. After that, I will be busy in the end of my 8-week semester through March 8th. I don't want to talk on the phone. I don't want to get involved in long emails until after March 8th. Let's touch bases with each other sometime in the early spring. I feel that we should be open to seeing other people eventually. He's already seeing somebody else. He wants to see how it plays out, and he doesn't want her to know about you. Because we both deserve a greater degree of stability than we have found in each other, I cannot continue this high-pitched intensity that seems to be the norm in our shared lives. I suggest we can talk after March 8th to see where we are. I am sorry I have not been in touch till now. I think you are a wonderful person and want nothing but good things for you, but we are clearly not happy together as a couple. Not on a day-to-day basis. I also share with you the feeling that we do not make collective decisions well. I can't imagine that we will be able to improve our collective decision making to the point that we will make a joint move and shared housing. I don't believe you are ready to do that. Even if we took that step, it's hard for me to imagine we could possibly live together peacefully. I love you, but I feel that we have major differences in terms of our temperaments. The level and frequency of our upsets in our relationship have not been healthy for me. I can't imagine it's been healthy for you either. Please respect my wishes, and let's be in touch after March 8th. I was crushed by his words to me. Not the least of which was because at the time, mid-February, it had only been a little over a month since he had been here with me in my apartment and we had made love, or what I thought was making love. Not sure. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, does a person change that quickly, go from let's start planning and moving in together in the upcoming spring to I think we should be open to seeing other people eventually? And that was and it was that word in particular, eventually, that annoyed me the most. As if as if he had been truly serious then why would he even feel the need to include the word eventually to end the end of the sentence, you know? After sharing this email with some trusted friends, and I know known me for years, and the consensus seemed to be that he was relegating me and our relationship with one other to an option that he could seemingly choose at will. So in my mind, I post-mailed the engagement ring back to him at his university. No less certified mail. Yes, we were engaged, for all it seemed to be worth at the time. I made sure to follow up and phone the university mailroom to make sure the room had in fact been delivered to his English department, even though I had received a confirmation email. At the same time I sent that engagement ring back, I also blocked his cell and work numbers, work and personal emails, deleted him from my Skype and LinkedIn accounts, and also deleted my book review for one of his books on Amazon, as I had previously mentioned. I am not on Facebook. I had cried and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. I felt a dream collapsing in on itself and wondered if this is what he had wanted all along. I can't really remember how I first stumbled on the word narcissist and the term narcissistic personality disorder. It must have resulted from a Google search. The thing is, I'm not the sort of person who even likes or believes in labels or categorizes someone, because I think in general it's not a good thing to do, that most people in situations are more complicated. However, in this one instance, when I began watching your videos, as well as other people's videos on YouTube, it began to all make perfect awful sense. The stonewalling, the gaslighting, the projection, the denial, all of it, everything. It was as if that had happened over the last 4.5 years. Finally, at last, made sense. The label narcissist explains so much. There was a word for all this, for what I had experienced. I was shocked, senseless. I couldn't believe such people exist in real life. I knew the origin myth of narcissists, and I knew that there would be characters like this in movies, but to actually encounter one and immediately involved with one was almost more than my mind and heart could sustain. I felt unreal in the fact, kind of like being in a horror movie, a really bad horror movie. True to form, guess what happened next? Just as he said on March 8th, he followed up with an email titled, "Want to Talk." I didn't respond. After that, there were yet more emails, none of which I opened, with various subject lines such as job interviews, reflections on the last few months, and please talk soon. None of these were opened by me, and I was somewhat incredulous that he was continuing to write. Although, as I later discovered through my research and reading, this was the hoovering tactic in full force. I should also mention that prior to his follow-up email to me on March 8th, a trusted friend informed me that my now apparent ex-narc had removed all my pictures from his Facebook page, which only confused me further. Then why was he continuing to write me? Because that's just part of the game. It's devaluing. It's devaluing. Look, he's running what is known as the D.E.N.N.I.S system. And if you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you know what the D.E.N.N.I.S system is. D.E.N.N.I.S is an acronym for his name. D.E.N.N.I.S. D, demonstrate value. I, initiate contact. N, nurture dependence. And second N, neglect emotionally. Second I, inspire, or the first or I, inspire hope, and S, separate entirely. D.E.N.N.I.S, the D.E.N.N.I.S system. If you watch that show is about watching five narcissists implode. He's Dennis Reynolds. Infatuated with himself, will destroy anybody who comes against him, uses anybody. He goes from N, the second N, to I. Neglect emotionally, inspire hope. Neglect emotionally, inspire hope. Okay? He's wanting you to believe maybe he's getting to the S, separate entirely, by removing all your Facebook pics. That should make you happy that he took you down. Maybe he's moving away. But he's really not, because what he's really doing here is the second N. Neglecting emotionally, so you'll run back and he can then inspire hope. He is keeping you in that between the second N and the I of the D.E.N.N.I.S system. Especially as I had sent the engagement ring back of my own free will, it was truly as if he was completely ignoring that fact. Willfully and stubbornly so. I should also mention, I should also mention here that his second ex-wife, you refused to give her ring back. It was a family heirloom, supposedly. I'm not sure if anyone has ever left him before. I think he's the one who always does the leaving, and so maybe he just couldn't cope with the fact that he had left. But what choice did he leave me really? I couldn't have stayed with him, and he still respected my own self. And also, more than anything, I just felt so very weary and so very tired of it all. I also now feel that I have stayed with him and my soul would have died. I meant to share with you too, when I returned from my UK trip, he never once asked to see the pictures, though I texted him some pictures while overseas, because he didn't care. When I asked him why he didn't seem curious to see all the pictures of my travels, he said, reiterating the same old, you're a grown adult woman, why should I have to ask you? If you want me to look at pictures, just show them to me. Throughout the past year, his university had been experiencing financial issues. He was tenured faculty, and the university had laid off some tenured faculty last summer. I tried to be a good, loving, and supporting girlfriend by encouraging him to apply for other jobs, which he began doing. To be fair, the job that I have currently, he did help me by writing a recommendation letter for me. So when I had time throughout my workday, I would spend time looking at online jobs for him in his field. Back in December, I did find a job that I felt he would be qualified for. Another MFA program director position at university in Massachusetts, and sent him the link. He wrote back asking, I don't know what you mean. Do you want me to apply for this job? I wrote him back saying, no matter what happens with us, I will always want the best for you. This was before I discovered that he was a narcissist and how much he had been manipulating me. I remember hesitating slightly before I sent him the job link because of what it could potentially mean. But then I said to myself, no, I don't want to be the sort of person who purposely would not do something that has the chance to improve someone's life. I don't want to be petty. I sent him the link for the job. So he applied for the job. He was interviewed for the job. I had a moment of weakness and read 2 more follow-up emails from him. Yes, he was still continuing to email me. This is the first of the 2 emails that he sent that I read. I would like to talk to you soon. Please let me know a good time to call or a good time when you call me. I interviewed last week at university. The MFA offices are a 5-minute walk from Harvard Square. A strange thing happened too. I didn't realize until I arrived that Leslie shares a small, very beautiful campus with the Episcopal Divinity School where my dad graduated in 1953. I could see the chapel where he was ordained from the window of the room where I was interviewed by the search committee. The morning sessions, the search committee interview, my presentation of a craft talk, and the lunch with the search committee went as well as they could have gone, but I was fighting the flu. Everyone has it here. Half the English department, and faded a bit in the afternoon sessions with other school administrators. Possibly they will offer me the job. We'll not discuss any of the financial issues. That is always the last conversation after the job offer comes through. Meanwhile, the administration continues its aggressive treatment of the faculty. For the first time in 6 years, we will get a 2% across the board raise, but my contract, they had the gall to tie my 2% cost of living raise to MFA enrollment. If I don't hit the enrollment projection for the summer fall, I will be the sole faculty member on campus who does not get a raise. The rest of my contract remains the same as before for 1 more year. There is a new provost on camp. He arrived only 2 weeks ago. I will meet with him to discuss the new clause in my contract. If he is not willing to remove it, if they do not hire me, I will serve as MFA director for 1 more year, then return to full-time teaching in 2017-18. My fear, if I stay in the director's position indefinitely, is that they will continue to treat me differently than other faculty, removing my eligibility for sabbaticals and any future. Like, who gives a shit? This is all about him not having money. So it's time to make a decision. If the job is offered to me, I will move by July 1st to an area outside Cambridge where rents are cheaper. By cheaper, I mean $1,600 to $1,800 for a 2-bedroom. That is the amount I plan on paying, hoping that they will offer a higher salary that will make up that difference. Houses can still be bought in some outer parts of Boston for $250,000 to $300,000. The possibility of buying a house would be a future decision. Mortgage payments on a house, that price would probably be around $2,000 to $2,500 a month. Have you entirely removed out a move to the Boston area? I hope you will give it some more thought. Harvard Square is very beautiful with many nice houses, coffee houses, ethnic restaurants, good bookstores, and shops. If I stay in Ashland U by 2017, if not before, I will move to the west side of Cleveland, likely to Ohio City, where we had dinner at a Cambodian restaurant and went reading afterward in a beer hall. Or to Tremont near Ohio City, where a drunk offered to buy us drinks one day. That location cuts off 15 to 20 minutes of the drive to Ashland each way. If I begin to teach 4 courses on campuses per semester, I will need to drive to campus 3 to 4 times a week. I will hear from them within 2 weeks. The deadline to sign my Ashland contract is May 9th. It looks like a change is coming my way. Living in Charleston is not a possibility for me, and Columbus would be difficult too, involving 3 hours round trip driving with every day on the Ashland campus as opposed to 2 hours from West Side Cleveland. These are realities of my work situation, the scenarios above the sketch, above the decisions I will need to make in order to work out well. Please give some thoughts to all this and let me know if you feel you can embrace either the west side of Cleveland or Cambridge, Massachusetts. I would love to discuss this by phone. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with me. The second email followed. Leslie called you today to offer me the position directing the MFA program. The position carries the rank of full professor, but is 100% administrative assignment. All administrators, including the dean, are on a year-by-year contracts. The terms are about what I make here, including the supplemental money I made at Ashland in addition to my base contract. Plus, Leslie offered enough to make up the difference in cost of housing. So I'll have about the same amount of discretionary spending, but we'll be closer to the kids. Jonah will likely move to the Boston area next fall for the last year. During that year, he will apply to graduate schools. Possibly he will live with me. Possibly he will share an apartment with friends. Serenade of 3 hours north. I accepted the offer. I am walking away from tenure, although it seems that the tenure system was thoroughly undermined last summer. Plus, Leslie had better endowment, not huge, but three times Ashland's in recent years, had actually awarded cost of living raises, etc. In addition, it was clear to me after my meeting with the new provost that many terms of my contract were going to change by spring 2017 with all the instability. So many faculty taking other positions, this is a good time to leave. I would really rather talk about this on the phone. Please write back and let me know a good time to call. They want me to participate in their 9-day June residency. Then I'll come back to Ashland to compete in one last 2-week residency in late July. Then my position officially starts August 1st. I will be in the office every day. I will need to have an apartment in the Cambridge area by July 1st. Let's talk soon. I was absolutely floored by these emails. The conversational tone, as if we'd just spoken previously, he was simply filling me in on the events of his day. Yeah, they'll always act like nothing's wrong to test the waters. I shared both of these emails with my therapist. I started seeing a therapist back in late March who's been very helpful. She specializes in trauma work, who replied, "These are simply stunning and not in a good way either." He even sent me follow-up emails about the health of his dog, which while they were together, he had been our dog. This is inspiring hope. That's all he's doing by acting like, oh, maybe nothing, we can go back. No, you can't go back to like nothing. I knew my previous visit back in October of this past year that she had been in failing health, and I suspect she may have passed away by now. I really did love her so much, and there are 2 regrets I have. They are these: that they didn't get to properly say goodbye to this beautiful dog who I loved and had taken care of, and was also not able to explain to his gay son why I had left his father, why I had no choice but to do so, because I am pretty sure that his son is being told a falsehood about me, that I have issues, and that I was a drama queen, something that my often said to me, and also about other women as well. It's so frustrating to feel fairly certain that my name and reputation has been besmirched, and there is absolutely nothing I can do about it. Or maybe there is, maybe, just maybe, out of many people who watch your channel, someone will recognize this man I am describing and will know. I think that's the thing for me. I need people to know. I have read that no contact is not only the best thing for survivors, but is also the best revenge against the narcissist, and I hope it is true. I feel such anger and rage, and it has affected both my work and personal relationships. I have lashed out at well-meaning friends, which I profoundly regret. I have randomly become angry and enraged with people precisely because I cannot transfer my own rage and anger onto the one person who truly deserves it, my ex-narcissist. To those friends who I have heard who might be listening and watching this, I plan on sending them a link to the video to make the video you make for me once I receive it. I would say like this: please forgive me and try to understand that I have been feeling so incredibly painful and hurt. I want my friends to know that I love and care about them, and that is their very love and care that has helped sustain me during the past 6 months, and indeed during the last 4.5 years of my relationship with the narcissist. So what have I learned from all this? Actions speak louder than words. That that just became someone attended Amherst University and Iowa University writers program, that they can still lack emotional intelligence, insight, and self-awareness. That being a descendant of the original Mayflower constitutes constituents isn't a big deal, as many ex-narcissists always talked about it as though it was. That just because someone appears to be a great father, that they could still be a lousy boyfriend. That I will never again allow myself to take risks with my health, be it physical, mental, or emotional. And lastly, that I deserve better, and that I always did. So what hurts the most? The fact that when my ex sent that original letter, what sounded like a pseudo breakup letter upon first reading, was really just an attempt to control and manipulate me into doing what he wanted. And the fact that in order for him to send that email, he had to be so sure of what my reaction and response would be. In other words, that he would take the risk of losing me and losing our love. Indeed, I hope at his words, at any rate, I need a great deal of space, come back to haunt him. Because baby, you got your space, you got a ton of it. But then I keep coming back to the same question over and over again. Was any of it real? Was any part, even a sliver of it, all we experienced together, real? Because real love doesn't try to dominate and control you, to control and force you to submit. Real love doesn't involve making your partner feel anxious and worried all the time and creating an emotional sense of being kept off balance and being unsure about how much you are loved. And I suppose ultimately real love is unconditional love, something my ex-narc was not capable of. It hurts Ollie a lot. I feel a strong need for karma to come back on him, for life to give him his due justice in some manner. Part of me feels like he has a new opportunity. It's like a freshly minted new penny. He gets to walk off into the sunset, a new job, a new city, a part of the country in Massachusetts where he always wanted to be, closer to his children now. While I am left to pick up the remains of my life and try to regain the friendships that were in existence long before I knew him and suffered as a result of me almost anyways being away in another state where he lived at the time with him. I hate him, and yet sometimes I hate myself even more for allowing him to hurt me, for giving him access to me this way. I knew my fears of abandonment used them against me. I feel like it was a game, but I didn't know that it was a game and that he had a rule book all along. I need to know he will suffer. And if you knew me, you would know that for me to write such a long thing is so unlike me. But that this was the effect that he had on me in my life. I am slowly starting to put my life back together. I am still employed at my job. I have a very understanding and compassionate supervisor. I am exercising and eating healthy. I'm trying to move forward with my life in all ways, and most of all, I am trying to love myself and just be okay with myself. At some point in the future, I would like to believe that I could fall in love again, but for real this time. I have reciprocated in kind, but my ability to fully trust and believe in someone has been completely shattered. I have made a decision to spend this year working on myself and try to heal, recover, and recuperate. To become involved with anyone right now would only result in either me being hurt or another person being hurt, and that's the thing. There has been more hurt. There has been more than enough hurt. There has been too much hurt, and I don't want to add hurt to the world. I am fairly sure my ex is already dating, or at least looking, posting ads on websites, etc. I wish I could have a red flag and warn all the other unsuspecting single women in the 50 to 60 plus age group who live in Massachusetts to be wary of this man who presents himself as being the perfect catch when really is anything but that. I worry I'll never have sex again, never fall in love again, never trust again. I hope I am proven wrong one day, but about all three of these things. Thank you again, Ollie, for giving voice to my words. giving space to my pain and allowing me the opportunity to share my story. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments about this. Once again, thank you so very much. Please keep doing what you're doing. You're helping a lot of wounded souls, including mine. Okay. I am sorry that I did not know this was going to be this long. I didn't. Thank you for your contribution and your story. I really do appreciate it. It's just, this is very, very long. And you got to figure out how to go no contact, because you were no contact and then you started reading his letters, and you got to cut it off. You can't care about what's on his Facebook page or what he's doing, or you can't listen to stories from other people because that's what he wants. You're being played, like I said, in the D.E.N.N.I.S system. You're going, it's moving back and forth and back and forth. As far as what you're worrying about at the end here, don't. If it comes, it comes. But if you actively seek it, it's not gonna happen. And remember where you are here. This guy is a consummate user, and all he's doing is trying to inspire hope and act like nothing has changed and nothing has happened. And you can't allow yourself to do that. So continue with your therapy. Continue your no contact. Cut them off and stay cut off. Don't hold on to it. Just delete them and block everything and move forward. So thank you again for your support and your story. I hope this video helps. Thank you to everyone who's made it this far watching this. Again, I apologize. I didn't realize it was going to be this long. And again, please leave any advice or opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you know what to do with the PayPal and my email links in the description box. I'll have the video right back to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon.